Hey everyone, welcome to episode 40 of the Miami Tech Pod. I'm Cesar, joined by Maria and Brian this week. Will is taking the day off, building some really cool things, and we will be with Will relatively soon here. But we have a very special guest, Alex Nucci, the CEO and co-founder of Blanket. Alex, welcome to the Miami Tech Pod.
Thank you guys for having me. Did Will really have the day off, or he just not want to see me?
It's debatable.
Okay.
No, just kidding. No, he's swamped, man. We're super proud of him. He's building really cool things that we're going to highlight soon. But yeah, no, Will is in hardcore founder mode right now.
Awesome.
But if we were to come full circle, you're in Will's old office, aren't you?
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on. So I'm right now in the old Live Ninja space, which Will has a desk here, or at least he used to. I haven't seen him recently, but no, Will's awesome. And super happy that we have this office space here and kind of go full circle on the whole Miami startup scene.
Will told us that he has an Alex Nucci NFT, and that was good enough for him. He didn't need an actual.
Whoa. What are we talking about here? What's an Alex Nucci NFT? Let's go. I want to hear this.
Floor price seems pretty low on that one. I would think.
You get paid to mint them. It's weird. I don't know. Alex is distributing all this Ethereum for the gas. Yeah.
You buy one. It comes with unlimited supply of waffles. I mean, look, we're onto something here. So Alex, we'll get to Blanket in a little bit, and but you've been building companies in Miami for a while. This is not your first rodeo.
Nope.
Why don't you start really quick with a little bit of your background, and then we'll jump into some big news in Miami Tech this week.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah, so I was born in Miami, but my parents are from Venezuela. I actually lived in Venezuela until I was 13, then moved back to South Florida. I grew up in Weston. When I was probably around a teenager, my dad wanted to get his papers so we could stay here in the U.S. And he asked, I'm making a long story short, but essentially he said, like, if I retire and you and your brother take over a company, what would that company be about? And of course, being a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old, that was at the time, and my brother being 18 or 19-year-old, we said something to do with cars, like something automotive space. So we started a small shop with just essentially the goal of seeing if we can sustain it for long enough to get the papers and then take it from there. And started selling car parts. From there, we started building like an online store for it. Eventually, Google Ads came out, and we started investing into that. So little by little, it became less of this like mom and pop store to sell shops or sell car parts from the shop, and more it became an online operation. Eventually, we started growing that. We reached like $10 million in sales over the course of, I don't know, probably 10 years or something like that.
And completely bootstrapped, or?
I mean, bootstrapped, I wouldn't say. The family, we invested a significant amount of money into it, but definitely not external funding. Like, the company ended up failing. One of the reasons it failed, it's just like we didn't surround ourselves with the right folks. Just pure ignorance, like teenagers growing up. I actually, so when we started the company, I was in high school. By the time the company started taking off, I had started studying at FIU, and by year one of FIU, I'm like, fuck this, I'm dropping out. Like, I made it. Like, I know exactly what I'm doing, and just like, of course, we didn't. But yeah, when that company wrapped up, my lessons from it were like, all right, like, Google AdWords, this whole digital advertising, digital sales stuff, like, this is going somewhere. It feels ridiculous to say it like that right now. Of course, like, these are now the most profitable and most, in terms of market cap, the largest companies in the world. But I said, I want to make a career out of this. And then I started seeing who was doing tech in Miami, and I couldn't find real folks doing tech in Miami.
What year was this, to give a sense of the timing here?
Yeah, so this was probably around 2013, 2012 or so. I mean, I'm sure there were tech companies, but I couldn't point at a name or kind of certainly no critical mass. What time did Refresh start, Brian?
2006.
2006. Okay, so I wasn't on the newsletter then. It'd be great to see when I did sign up for it at some point.
I see some irony in your Google ad skills, but your lack of Google search skills
at
the time.
Burn. Oh man.
But we'll let that slide.
Love it.
Refresh didn't make it to Winston-Salem at that time.
Probably that was it. I mean, this is not this way anymore. But when I grew up in Weston, Weston was just a place you went to sleep. Like I think most of our lives were in Miami. Like I worked in Miami. I went to school in Miami. I went out at night in Miami. Like all these things I did were in Miami. So I always considered. Now it's not. Like I think people live in Weston and they stay in Weston and like they won't make it out for months or. I definitely like certainly not when I grew up there. So after we closed up this company, I said, all right, let me see what else I can do in the space. I started doing some consulting while I was figuring out what to do next. AdWords consulting and that kind of stuff. And I just started looking for companies that were hiring out of Miami in tech. And one of the companies I found was a company called Ship, SHYP. They had just raised a $10 million round, which was a very large amount in I want to say this was probably like 2014, 2013. And I said, awesome, they're hiring in Miami. They're launching the Miami market. They wanted somebody to run all the marketing and growth and sales and BD efforts. And I said, amazing. Interviewed with those folks, got the job, and started working in Miami. And as soon as I joined, by the way, they had just raised an additional $50 million, which was already in the works while I was applying. So that was my real first experience on like big budget marketing and sales, doing initiatives with the community. I was extremely grateful for all the people in Miami. Like I worked with, I had built a list of brands I respected in Miami, and I said I'm gonna try and work with all these guys at one point or another, and they all like accepted those requests with open arms. One of them was Refresh, so we sponsored the Refresh T-shirts. I don't know if you remember, Brian, but like every person that came to a Refresh event could get a T-shirt. So long as they downloaded the app, they used it, and you had to ship it to yourself, which was my way. So my metric at Ship used to be a first-time pickup, and we were having a very hard time getting people to download the app, put the credit card, and use it for the first time. Eventually, when people used it, they liked it, but just getting them to use the app the first time was very hard. So I just said, fuck it, I'm going to give them like this very big incentive to get them to use the app right away, and I'm just going to give them something that's worth around $10 to $20. And T-shirts was kind of the go-to for this. So we did this with Refresh. We did this with Wincode when they were just starting out. Yuha had us at one event. We did this with Tech.co. They used to host events. Wingwood Brewing, we give away beer glasses to anybody that came to Wingwood Brewing. It was like we emptied the shelves of beer glasses that they had that day, like hundreds of glasses we gave out. Did this with Panther Coffee, set up a table outside of Panther Coffee. I just bought as many bags of coffee as they would give me, and just got a ton of people to sign up for the app.
That's amazing. This is like guerrilla marketing tactics.
Oh man, just like I was consuming all the content that I was consuming around that era was around this stuff. So probably Seth Godin and a bunch of other names around this, but yeah.
What was the name of the CEO or the founder of Ship?
Good question. Kevin?
Kevin.
I'm forgetting his. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm forgetting his last name, but yeah.
I remember. So sorry to interrupt. I had this like a Twitter conversation or something like that with him years after Ship, like after they shut down, and I was like, how come you guys pulled out of Miami? And he was like, the people there weren't sophisticated. There's some bullshit thing, and I was like,
I don't like
go
that.
fuck yourself, dude.
For
like,
real.
Wow.
I'll give you some insight into, and this is really what kind of was happening. If we ask people on the street why they weren't using Ship more often, they would say, no, but I can just do this myself. And we'd say, okay, but how much is your time worth? Or how much you make an hour? Oh, I make $20 an hour, $25 an hour, $30, whatever the number was. And then we're like, but this, like going to the post office is a 2-hour thing. We'll do it for $5. I'm like, yes, but I'll do it myself. And I was just like, fuck, we couldn't just get over that. So I think that's what he meant in a very brief sense. That I think people, the responses we're getting, like if you read the results, what people were saying is they're not valuing, like they weren't understanding the value of their time in terms of money and what they're giving up, as opposed to going to the post office. So,
but that's always an interesting thread to like pull on, right? With any startup, right? Whenever you're creating your value proposition, if your main value proposition is saving time, we've now come to realize how bad people are at gauging the value of their time, because the reality is anyone making over 100,000 a year should never set foot in Publix again, right? Like they should like be using Instacart or something and paying $10 or $20 to have someone do groceries for them, or they shouldn't be cooking or whatever. If you were to think of it from a pure, like, every hour is a potential billable or earnable hour, right? And so, I mean, that's just a lesson I guess we can learn, but people aren't rational is really the lesson, right?
People aren't rational. Exactly. One of my favorite books is Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, and he just exposes like all these biases that we have, and just the way the whole book. I was talking about this yesterday on another piece I did, but essentially the whole book is just examples of how humans react in the way you don't expect them to. On that thread about, so I'm this way myself. Like, I will go to lunch today, and I'm not thinking if I'm going to go and spend $15 for lunch or $20 for lunch. But ask me to download an app that is $2. Just something about me has an allergic reaction to it. I'm like, oh no, this is a paid app. No, fuck no. It's like, dude, but you just like, you didn't even think about $15 or $20 for lunch. And that's something I'm going to repeat every single day, right? Like, that's a decision I repeat every day, and it has a total cost on my month of $100 versus this one that is a one-time purchase of an app for $2. So I don't know. We have all these weird reactions to pricing.
Alex, speaking of weird reactions to pricing, I want to talk about venture capital in Miami and the stage that we're in right now. So Nancy Dahlberg on Refresh, put a piece kind of aggregating all of the the funding numbers from Q3 of this year, and we saw $1.3 billion across 72 deals in Miami. And this does not include the $500 million raise by Magic Leap, and we'll talk about that after. But what are your thoughts? I mean, as someone who has built a company here, is no stranger to fundraising cycles and all of that. I mean, what's your overall reaction of where we're at right now?
I love it. I think it's amazing. I think it's like everybody in this call, our work or like we've worked towards this over several years, and see it happen is very rewarding. Like I think this is the future, right? I don't think the focus is so much. I mean, maybe the numbers show that Miami raised to 1.3, and it's a very large number. But I think the message overall is you no longer need to be in SF or New York to raise. So this, I'm like, just like it's affecting us positively, it's also affecting Minnesota or I don't know, some other city. Like, it is no longer necessary to be in those cities. Miami is seeing a bigger effect from this. Number one, because we have this community that has always been like fostering this stuff and moving it forward. And because Miami is a desirable city, like founders, if you ask them, where do you want to live? A good portion of them are going to say Miami. So amazing. I think this is, we raised, when we raised our seed round, we had like 3 hard no's because we were in Miami. And I just kept.
This is for Blanket?
For Blanket, yeah. So we raised a $3 million seed. And we were just like, people were saying they were liking a lot of the stuff they were seeing. But then they were just like, if you were in SF or if you were outside of Miami, we would say yes. And I just kept fundraising, and we're having a very hard time. And towards the end, I'm just like, I was telling Ricardo, our co-founder and CTO, like, dude, I'm going to move to SF. Like, I'm going to move there, build a team, show that I'm responsible enough that like, I'm not this like stereotypical Miami image they have in their head. And then we'll see, we'll take it from there. And just about, as we're about to pull the trigger on that, Slow Ventures, just didn't care. They're like, oh, you can be who led our seed round. And then the second biggest check in our round was Nico at Animal. He was just starting his fund. I think we're probably his first check, if not his second check. And then the third largest check was Rise to the Rest, the Steve Case fund, which is like they're literally investing in people outside. So we're
he's in Virginia, right? So it's like
exactly, yeah.
Like, who gives a shit about SF if I live in Virginia and see like interact with founders all over the world and all that. But
the name Rise to the Rest is right, like the rest of the country. Like, it's anybody that is not Boston, New York, and so I was super happy when we raised the round. I remember the feeling when I came back home and the news came out. Other founders saying like, "Holy shit! Like we can do this! Like, this is amazing." There were other stories, but it's just like another one of these stories that can happen. Nowadays, it's just like these things just happen every single day, probably every single day, really. So I love that we're in this situation right now, and that there's no the stigma about being in Miami is no longer a thing.
Yeah, to be
So
clear,
actually-
if Maria heard that you were trying to leave Miami, she would slash your tires, take your driver's license away, block you at the airport. Like, there's no chance
Oh,
that you're
man.
going to get out of here with
Yeah,
Maria's.
no, you're stuck.
Amazing.
No, but on that topic, I feel like we were used to hearing this a lot, where local founders kept getting told that they had to leave, and so I always thought it was a huge testament to the people who beat the odds and said, no, I'm going to stay here. So what made you stay in Miami when you kept getting told that you would have to leave in order that you could easily get funded if you left?
Yep. Well, when we started the company, our number one core value is remote first. So like in our values, we're like, we don't need to be NSF. So we're already believers of that. Like, people should be able to work wherever they are. If your company allows for that kind of stuff, if you build cruise ships like Carnival, you have to be in Miami, or a good chunk of people have to be in Miami. But if you're building software, not necessarily. So we just didn't subscribe to the fact that we should give into this too easily. Even if we would have, I mean, I'm just what I would have done is try to change the system from within, right? Like, do whatever it is I need to get to the next step, and then from there, do something different. But so that family, I grew up in Miami. I love Miami. To me, Miami is this, like, there have to be only a handful of cities in the world that they feel that they're this metropolis. Like, you have buildings, high rises, sophistication, and then like you cross a street and you're in a beach. Like, I don't know how many places in the world can say they have that. Probably 3 or 4. Yeah, my just family probably is the number one reason at a personal level.
Well, I feel so. Refresh did a report back in 2019 for the Downtown Development Authority on the state of the tech and startup ecosystem. I think I interviewed you the 2 years that we've done it for them. But we would hear this a lot, where a lot of local founders said, funding has gotten better, but talent, we're still like trying to grow our teams. And so many of them had already decided they were going to go remote first, which I like to think kind of better prepared them for when the pandemic did hit just like a year later, because they were already kind of implementing those tactics. So is that kind of the experience that you had, where you guys didn't skip a beat when the pandemic hit because you were just used to being distributed?
Yeah, for sure. So this is we were built that way. So when the pandemic hit, from that end, we weren't hit negatively. But by the way, like, going back to the funding, I think this is one of the main reasons also people are being able to get funding in Miami right now, right? Like, there was always this talent question, like, oh, you're amazing and your co-founder is great and all that stuff, but who wants to go to Miami? Like, what engineer is going to move to Miami? So that conversation, I think, is had, at least in that way, less and less, because people can now be wherever they are. And it unlocks, in my view, it unlocks a lot of those yeses that we're getting.
So we've talked a lot about like funding and all that stuff, but like, we actually haven't asked you, like, can you explain what Blanket is? I know that for years I teased you because you didn't have a website.
Yes.
And you were like, sort of like adamant or intentional about that. How you were like, you're like, I'm above websites. I'm above the internet, but no. So for the audience who've tuned in, give us sort of the rundown. Like, what is Blanket, and like, what sort of inspired the idea?
It's a direct-to-consumer blanket company, right? Like, if you're cold.
Exactly.
So are they weighted blankets? Are they?
They're snuggies.
Are they smart snuggies?
Smart snuggies.
So I'll get sales pitches from blanket manufacturers every week.
That's amazing.
From China, they're just like, our blankets are the best. You should buy them. No, so about the website piece, it's we part of what we do is build websites for a living for other people, or web pages, really, to host their content, their outbound content. The reason we never built a site is we had a wait list of customers. We always, like, our biggest thing that our biggest hurdle has always been handling more and more customers at the same time, concurrently, and keeping everybody happy. So we had no business interest in launching a website that explained everything that Blanket does to the world, because it's, if we're not using it for growth and we're not using it for recruiting, then that's why we held off on it. So about Blanket, what we do is we do automated outbound campaigns on behalf of our customers. So there's usually a person inside of modern sales teams that does this stuff. They're called an SDR or a BDR, so a sales development rep or a business development rep. And their whole job all day is to generate interest via outbound. So they'll go on LinkedIn, they'll find somebody that should be buying the product that they're selling. They'll get all their information. They'll send them an email. And as soon as they send them an email, they're waiting for the next step. If they don't take a next step, they'll follow up with another email, etc. And when they do show some interest, they hand them off to the account executive so they can close the deal, kind of the next person up in the sales team. Well, all that is kind of automatable today, or at least pieces of it. The prospecting part certainly is. Like, we'll find all the decision makers for a company, and then we'll put them through workflows. We'll start emailing those folks personalized emails, and we'll personalize the landing pages. So if we send like 10,000 different emails, we'll build 10,000 different landing pages. The landing pages will have the person's name, the company name, all that stuff in it. And then when they show interest, they click a button, we hand off the relationship to our customer. So it's, probably about 4 or 5 times as effective as your typical SDR setup. And there's a bunch of other stuff that we do on there. So we manage deliverability to make sure nothing happens to your domain. We make sure people stay within the realms of what's legit and legal, with unsubscribe links and just like mentioning all the right things that an email should do. And that's what we do. So it's B2B. If you sell a product to another business, you probably have a job title that you grab onto, like you're selling to the VP of something or senior or whatever. We'll find those folks and let them know that you exist, which is where the term blanket comes from, by the way. Like, we cover the entire market.
Cool. When did you start the company?
The company started 5 years ago. It is called Gramercy, the legal name. We were selling referral software. Mm-hmm. So like Uber style, if I refer you, you get $10 and I get $10. We built a mechanism that allowed other companies to have a program just like that. And when it was time to go to market, I started automating our outbound sales. So this is my background. My background is in sales and marketing my entire career. So I said, all right, let me find the reason this came about is I had like 4 or 5 experiments. And one of those experiments is reach out to 5 people with the best possible sales pitch you can on earth. Like, whatever it takes, just preemptively give them the best pitch without them even knowing who you are. So I recorded myself in a video speaking to them, to this person, and I screenshot their website, and I overlaid Gramercy, the product we were building, on top of the website. And I just did like insane amount. I wrote a blog post for them. I connected with everybody in the company on LinkedIn. I just like went insane, and all 5 people replied. And I got a meeting with all 5, and 3 of them became customers. So I'm like, amazing. Like, I can't possibly scale this, but there's a version of this I can scale. So the next week I did it, instead of for 5 people, I did it for like 100. And then the next week I did it for like 1,000. And then little by little, it's like, oh, if we automate this piece, if we grab the primary color from their website, we can color the widget this way. And I just started personalizing these pitches at scale. And then I would just book whatever amount of demos I gave myself in the calendar. Like, if I gave myself 4 hours of demos, I would book the 4 hours. Showed it to a few founder friends, and they're like, dude, like, Gramercy is not the shit. What's the shit is your sales approach. Like, just the fact that you're selling it this way, this is amazing. I'll pay you $5,000 if you do this for us. So I said, all right, let me find out if more people want to do this, and spoke with a few other folks. They were all interested. And just with that, we had like our first couple of customers at $5,000 a month. That's how we got our pricing and all that, and took it from there. Just around that time, we were pivoting. We were considering pivoting into this idea. Added a few teammates to kind of do it on a skunkworks format. Like, have this idea, focus on it. If this works, we'll pivot the entire company. And we did. We pivoted March 1st, or at least I sent the update March 1st of 2018. So 3 years we've been doing Blanket this way.
I feel like you need to print some of those first sales pitches and put them like up in the office somewhere, just for motivation and, like, reminder of the roots of the company.
Yeah, it's I would say in our DNA, we lack several things, but we don't lack work ethic and just like get shit doneness. Like, we do whatever it takes to kind of prove something or unprove it. But for sure, like, we have, I think Blanket has a bunch of stories like that, just like last ditch attempts, like all in, do as much as it takes to kind of prove this stuff out.
I feel like your next sort of side hustle needs to be like packaging this all up into like an online course, like land your first 100 B2B customers or something like that.
The Wolf of Wall Street style. Sell me this pen. I think you need a version of that for the internet.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because to me, sales and marketing is about incentive alignment. And the whole line about the Wolf of Wall Street, about sell me this pen, it's a test about you not selling the pen. What you want to sell is an incentive, like find a way to people get the pen, which is my whole thing, right? Like my whole thing around this called sales approach. I'm like, why don't more people launch referral programs on their company? Like, it's a pain in the ass to sell internally. It's a pain in the ass to get buy-in. It's like integrating is super hard. So I'm like, let me just do all that work. Let me put in one single page that can share internally to all the other stakeholders, and I don't have to resell them over and over again. I just want to create this single page. And that's kind of what we focus on today with our customers. During onboarding, we'll ask them questions like, what are the 3 biggest problems you're solving for your customers? And a lot of people have a hard time responding to that stuff because they don't necessarily, like, it's not natural, I think, to think in problems. After a while, you get into your day-to-day in the company and all this stuff you're doing, you start forgetting, like, what problem are you solving for your stakeholder and all those things. So
that's a really good point about incentives here and driving value to customers. I do want to shift gears to a topic that has a lot of those threads in here, right? And we've seen kind of the ups and downs of this company, but we just saw that Magic Leap announced that they've raised $500 million on a $2 billion valuation in what is kind of this enterprise pivot that they've been working on for a while. What does everyone think about this? I'd love to get a sense of what the real feeling towards Magic Leap. They've had a lot of excitement. They've had some challenges, some restructuring, all of that. But what's the state of that company in everyone's eyes right now?
My take on them is, and of course, I can only see what is in the media and like folks that I know that are maybe more intimate with the situation than I am. I have no insight into what they do. But from the outside looking in, to me, it's always felt like this super hard problem that they're solving. A lot of capital having been raised. I remember in the early days feeling like this awesome story for Miami because a bunch of people were moving in here from other places. We used to say Miami, but really, I think they've always been further up north, no?
Yeah.
So we take them and say they're from Miami when they're adding people, but then exactly.
Right.
That's I think one of the things that's really interesting is, like, we look at this and they're like $3.5 billion raised, right? And the current valuation is $2 billion, right? So the unfortunate thing is, for a lot of the early employees and the people who a huge percentage of their comp package was based on stock, like they end up getting wiped out on a lot of this stuff. That being said, all startups are a gamble, right?
Yes.
And like, you should build your life around that being a lottery ticket, not being an expectation of something you depend on for your day-to-day sort of lifestyle. But like, we see this $3.5 billion and we're like, this is a crazy amount of money, and it is a crazy amount of money, right? But then, like, the rumors are, like, Apple has been spending that much every year on their AR glasses and on their car projects and all these other things. But since it's such a small piece out of a $2 trillion organization, like, it doesn't matter as much, right? Same thing with Microsoft and HoloLens. They spent billions and billions of dollars developing this, and so there's clearly these people smarter than me think that this is a space worth investing in. The challenge is, when you're doing it as a freestanding company, you need to get a business model that can support it super fast, right? And so that might be contradictory to the massive R&D needs of such a big problem like this, right?
Yep, Brian, I think you nailed it. It's very much they're solving a really hard problem that takes a lot of capital, right? It's a huge risk, but they wanted to move fast and move first, so that if they nailed it, the upside is that much greater, right? So this was like a high stakes company to begin with. That's how I see it. I have a somewhat like, I don't view a company like this that hasn't really figured it out, has raised, is like in a down round, has raised more money than they're valued at, all of that. Like, I don't necessarily feel that it's like inherently a failure because of that. I think, like, people that view and comment on the startup world is like, oh man, like they really need to, like, get their shit together. It's like, but they're solving a super hard problem, right? That is super capital intensive, right? the other side to that is, it has to be really, really tough internally to work there, right? You have a lot of uncertainty, a lot of dilution. It's really hard to keep the ship together and everyone rowing in the same direction when you have pivots and changes in management and all of that. So I think what I would say about Magic Leap today is two things need to happen for that company. One, they need to very quickly, to your point, show revenue, to show their employees hey, this is not just a big science project, this is a business, and we finally found out how we're gonna pull this off, right? And then number two is really, really, really strong leadership that says that every single day wakes up and demonstrates and basically tells the employees this is what we're building. This is why this is going to be a game-changing company, and it has to have really inspiring outlook for the future, not just on a revenue, but on a mission standpoint. Because otherwise, it is really, really tough to ignore offers from the hot companies that are lean and raising capital and are in a just up into the right position, like we're seeing in Miami now, like Blanket, right, Alex?
Yeah, thanks, man. By the way, you touched on a very good point. The people aspect is probably the toughest one. Just like morale, this is all very public. The numbers they handle are so large that it just becomes news. And I'm sure from friends and family members asking how are things at Magic Leap every time you see them, because it's if you somewhat follow business, you're going to see a headline about it. To bring in, so if they just raised $500 million. They need to put it to work. Recruiting the right team with the right morale and having them say yes to this versus you touched on Apple and you touched on HoloLens and all these guys, or Oculus. What makes them come to Magic Leap? That to me is probably the biggest hurdle to get over.
And Brian, we should probably have Ronnie Abovitz on the podcast. I know he's shared some links a few times and all of that. To really, we're not in the company. We probably know less than 1% of what has actually gone on and all of that. I mean, I'm sure he can share the stories of the early days of the company building and all of that. But, one thing that is also true is if you have that breakthrough moment, then everyone just kind of forgets about the roller coaster ride and just looks at your success, right? How many people told Elon Musk electric cars are never going to happen? This is ridiculous. You're first of all, you should not focus on 3 companies. You should only focus on one. You're burning money. This car is not going to work. You're not delivering fast enough. And then it worked. And it's best entrepreneur of all times, richest man in the world. Tesla's changing the world. Everyone's now following suit. Electric vehicles, right? That was the kind of positioning and bet that Magic Leap was taking on AR.
It's easy to ridicule. If you make very big bets, it's easy to say look, of course it wasn't going to work. The technology or the previews you showed are insane. Of course it wasn't going to work until it does. So yeah.
A lot of this is timing too, right? Timing from a fundraising standpoint, from a technology standpoint. If you're doing deep tech, which this is, if they had started this last year or 2 years ago, they'd have SPAC'd already, and people will be talking about how
Absolutely.
Magic Leap is run on hydrogen fuel cells and blah blah blah, and it's also merged with the burger company down here somehow and whatever, right? And they'd be sitting on $4 billion in cash from some SPAC, and but 7 or 8 years ago, whenever it was that they started this, that wasn't the trendy way of financing, or that wasn't palatable by the market, But remember, they had big money from Alibaba, from the Saudi prince, from
AT&T.
SoftBank, AT&T, everybody.
Google.
Right?
Google, yeah.
Google too, yeah.
I mean, those are smart folks. They must know what they were doing or what they were betting on.
I would love to, in the future, be able to walk down the street in Midtown Miami wearing an AR headset, recording the Miami Tech Pod, and not have to be stationary. Do we think that is going to happen in 5 or 10 years ago?
I would say 6 years, and you will be sitting on one of those vertical takeoff landing planes that you're lobbying for, Cesar.
On
your way
jam,
to
yeah.
You know,
It's like we can do a whole VTOL episode, but that it's right around the corner. That's not a that's not a 5 or 10 year thing. That's a 2 or 3 year thing.
Several of those in Miami, no? VTOLs.
Yep. For the listeners, vertical takeoff and landing, several different models, but for the most part, electric, urban air mobility. Everyone says flying cars, but these are much more, certified aircrafts than flying cars.
are those all going to be self-driving, Cesar?
In the future, yeah. There's some people or some, in full disclosure, I work with Lilium. They're a public company, furthest along in FAA certification, all of that. They have a FAA certified pilot in their launch plans to pilot the aircraft. But there are some companies that are kind of going autonomous first and skipping that step. It's just kind of a difference of philosophy of like a go-to-market strategy for the industry. But yeah, there's others, Archer, Volocopter, Eve. There's a lot of companies that are, kind of taking a big bet in that space right now.
Can you imagine if Miami drivers were empowered to drive like vertical takeoff landing vehicles? Like you would have to you'd be getting like rear-ended or above-ended or whatever,
Right.
in every direction because some jackass is like texting or filming everything for only in Dade, while
Yeah.
I think Miami requires self-driving VTOLs.
Look, the FAA is for sure will never be comfortable with just like chaos in the skies that close to an airport. So it's a relatively it's an extremely regulated industry, and there's a lot of people that think this is going to be this is a passenger game. This is not a pilot or driver game, right? There's certainly not going to be people taking their own VTOL from Maria's luscious tropical backyard to Miami Beach or anything like that.
Meticulous backyard, Maria. Great job.
Cool. All right, team. And anything else for this week? Alex, this is you have the floor. If you want to pitch anything, tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you.
Well, Alex, you'll be happy to know that this will go live on Monday when your website will be launched, it sounds like. So
look at that.
Okay.
Well
Amazing.
timed.
Yep. Reach out to me at alex@blanket AI. Send me all your cold emails because I'm certainly sending you all of mine. I work out of Wynwood. I'm on Twitter at Alex Nucci. Reach out at any point in time. Love to help wherever I can.
Thanks, everyone. This was a wonderful episode 40 of the Miami Tech Pod. We'll be with you next week with an exciting guest. And thanks for everyone who's been, sharing, liking. There's the Twitter like mafia that instantly, after every single episode is posted, gives us a lot of love. So we know who you are. Shout out to those folks. And we'll have a great episode in the future for you. Take care.